Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm Terry, your host, coming to you from Chambersburg Street here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, right here by the Thaddeus Stevens sign. If you ever saw the movie Lincoln, Thaddeus Stevens is the guy played by Tommy Lee Jones. Very interesting history, but he lived here in Gettysburg. So the direction I'm facing is west towards Chambersburg. The Gettysburg Square is behind me. And Stevens owned a metal smelting furnace out west of town that the Confederates made sure they destroyed when they were in this area in the summer of 1863, mainly because Stevens is like a very famous abolitionist and did a lot for this community over the years that he lived here. But I had the occasion to be up on Culp's Hill today, and I'm going to share a little bit of what I call battlefield sleuthing with you, and then we'll talk about some trucking stuff. Okay, so I'm back on the battlefield here at Gettysburg. It's a beautiful day. A lot of people out here today. It's kind of funny living in this area. I look forward to the colder weather, sometimes rainy weather. The battlefield's a lot more quiet. There's definitely nobody riding around on Harleys, because I feel like the battlefield is somewhat like the silence is important. But anyway, it is what it is, and the weather's nice today. So right here behind me, like right there and right there, are this would be the right flank of the 121st Pennsylvania, and this would be the left flank of the 80th New York. And these are just regimental position markers that are here on the battlefield. But if you look up here, back through these woods, is where the Thompson house is. And I want to talk about that because I was talking about Thaddeus Stevens a couple of minutes ago. And there's an interesting backstory to the Thompson house, because the widow Thompson house was Robert E. Lee's headquarters. But since we're out here in the area where the first fighting happened on the morning of July 1st, 1863, I'm going to show you a couple other things. So that monument back there, that's the 80th New York's regimental monument. But if you look back here, this is the Herbst Woods. And on the other side of that is the McPherson farm where, and by the way, this street is Reynolds Avenue. And on the McPherson farm was where John Reynolds, the Union First Corps, well, actually the Union Left Wing commander, but generally the Union First Corps commander, was killed early in the battle. But in the Herbst Woods, out to the west here is the Willoughby Run, and that's where the 26th North Carolina was basically shredded by the Union Iron Brigade. And those troops from Henry Heth's division that had pushed up the Chambersburg Road found out that they weren't facing just some militia. Of course, they should have probably known that, because there was a huge contingent, an entire division of cavalry, Union cavalry, so regular army and volunteers that slowed them down coming down the Chambersburg Road. But let's go visit over at the widow Thompson farm, and I'll show you some pictures that I actually took earlier a few days ago. Okay, so this is the widow Thompson farm, and it's I'm trying to put my finger out there. That house, sorry it focused on my finger. So the stone house in the center, that's the widow Thompson farm. And across, and by the way, that's US 30 right there that runs right beside it. That's the Chambersburg Road. And the house across the street from it, that white clapboard house, was where Thompson's son lived. And just to set the scene, this is Seminary Ridge. So some of those buildings, not all of them, but some of them, and you know, the trees are blocking the view of some of them, but they were there during the Battle of Gettysburg. And in fact, John Buford used the cupola in this building, this brick building right here at the center, to keep an eye on the Confederates that were trying to come up the Chambersburg Pike. And I'll just pan around here, and this is going to be the inventor of baseball, General Abner Doubleday, who this day on July 1st was actually in command of the Union First Corps, because as I mentioned earlier, John Reynolds was commanding the entire left wing of the Army of the Potomac. So one of the interesting ironies of the battle, I find, is that I was talking about Thaddeus Stevens and how the Confederates had burned down his smelting operation west of Gettysburg. But what they didn't know, and probably couldn't have known unless they came into town and checked the tax records, was that the house that the widow Thompson lived in was actually owned and controlled by Thaddeus Stevens. She lived there after the original owner built it around, I think around 1823. But she couldn't own the property. So Thaddeus Stevens, who was a businessman, congressman, and by the way, I think I mentioned he was played by Tommy Lee Jones in the movie, the movie Lincoln, the one that starred Daniel Day-Lewis. But anyway, Thaddeus Stevens was the trustee. He owned that house in trust for the widow Stevens. And like I said, I think it's, or maybe I didn't say it, but I think it's because she couldn't hold property as a woman. So normally if somebody was widowed, the property would just be held in the estate of their deceased husband. But I don't think that she moved into that property until after her husband had passed away, so it wasn't going to be hers, and he didn't own it. So I just think it's one of the just bizarre ironies that Robert E. Lee's headquarters, so every important Confederate figure at this battle passed through those doors, but it was a house owned by one of the strongest abolitionist congressmen in the North. And so I feel like they would have picked another headquarters had they known it was Thaddeus Stevens's house. But anyway, I thought that was just an interesting fact. Oh, so yeah, you saw those pictures I took of the widow Thompson house. Another interesting thing about that house is that there are these fixtures on the battlefield that are cannons that are placed, cannon tubes that are placed vertically, and they're used to mark places where there was a headquarters of like a corps commander or something. And there are several places, but the interesting thing about the one that's placed there is it's placed across the street, across US 30 that I showed you. And that's because the National Park Service has never owned the Lee's headquarters. They own the headquarters where Meade was over on the Taneytown Pike, but they've never owned the widow Thompson house. And they still don't. However, the widow Thompson house has been restored. Okay, so enough about history, and it took me a while. It's taken me a while to just get the time to do a video, finish a video. But there was some trucking stuff I wanted to talk about. And it's kind of funny because I just got a video sent to me by somebody. It's a YouTube video. It's like a hidden camera video from some Canadian trucking schools. And I've said this in the past, right? Like, to me, the enemy of U.S. trucking is Canadian trucking. And Canadian truckers coming down here, like I've said before, why are there so many Canadian plated trucks in the U.S.? Canada has a population that's smaller than California's. They can't need that much stuff up there. And they don't have that much stuff to export. And a lot of what they export comes out on rail. So, I've often wondered about what's going on up there. And people have mentioned to me the licensing procedures. But it was really interesting that this friend of mine sent me that video because I came across an article from a newspaper up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, about a member of parliament up there that basically condemned the Ontario provincial government for just outsourcing licensure of commercial motor vehicle operators. And the OPP, which is the Ontario Provincial Police, so like, I guess they'd be like state police, but the provincial police, so they're not under the, I guess they would be under the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but somebody that's from Canada may know the structure better than I do. But anyway, the OPP did an investigation into these licensing agencies that, again, are many of which are like businesses and not actually the government. Like, a lot of this has been outsourced. And they found that interpreters were fraudulently completing the testing requirements for the applicants. And that because Ontario's government, and I believe Ontario is the most populous province in Canada, so it would be like the most populous state in America having the weakest, licensure requirements. That, would be California. Of course, Florida has really weak licensure issues, and so does Texas, but they haven't outsourced it that I know of to where the government doesn't get involved in it. But the other thing is that there's been tons and tons of non-Ontario residents that have come to Ontario to get their CDLs or the Canadian equivalent of that. And then the other thing that's been going on is there's been a circumventing of the mandatory entry level training. The MLET is what they referred to it as. That's another thing that the OPP found. And the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company, they did an investigation, and they just released a documentary about their investigation on this. And what's driving these members of parliament to criticize the provincial government is that there have been, I guess, tons and tons of really bad accidents, and they found out, hey, there's, this person was licensed pursuant to a fraudulent scheme. And again, I said this before, and I continue to believe that the Canadian trucker, the person driving on a Canadian base plate, is the one that U.S. authorities should be more concerned about than, say, anybody that's driving that has like a dual, like Texas, Mexico license plate. We know that the standards, because the Canadians have said so, the standards are either non-existent or have been greatly diluted, and it's a for-profit enterprise in Canada. So whenever you introduce a profit motive into stuff, there's going to be some kind of chicanery. And it just really makes me wonder why states that, especially states where a lot of these drivers are coming in initially, like Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Maine, why these states are not way more aggressive on, in making sure that the drivers that are coming in, and maybe, I don't know, maybe U.S. Customs, why they're not making sure that people have everything that they're supposed to, and that they're properly licensed. So I just feel like we ignore a lot of stuff at our peril. Like I was telling this driver that I was talking to the other day, I said, you every single day, if you're a truck driver, you see trucks going down the road that will not pass a DOT inspection, that you you just see what you see. And after a while, you kind of know what you know what's wrong. And yet, and I've had this happen. I've seen cops sitting in the median, a truck will go by that doesn't even have trailer lights on. That should be an easy, first of all, it's an easy ticket. But second of all, it should just be automatic that they pull that person over. But what are they looking for? They're looking for somebody that fits the description of a person that's, hauling 10 pounds of meth. And their justification is that it's not, it doesn't make any headlines when they get a commercial vehicle off the road. But the truth is that the commercial vehicle is the threat to everybody on the highway. The guy hauling meth from, Chicago to Columbus, he's not a threat to me. Now, he might be a threat to somebody, but he's not a threat to me. But the guy that doesn't have a CDL that's driving an 18-wheeler, the guy that's driving the 18-wheeler that has, only 14 good brake pads, he's a threat to me. And, this stuff that we've heard from Canada should just really give every U.S. authority pause. There should be, I would expect, when I go in somebody else's country, that I'm going to be under more scrutiny than their citizens. But I don't feel like that's the case here. And I know that our largest trading partners are here in North America. But I really do think that it's in the public best interest for everybody to start cracking down on this stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm guessing nothing is going to happen. And they'll, even if a Canadian trucker causes a bad wreck and a bunch of people get killed, they'll be like, oh, we got to do something about it. But nothing will really happen because the enforcement agencies, they're more concerned about having some picture on the TV news of some alleged drugs on a table and alleged drug money and, a couple of handguns and some mug shots, right? They're more concerned. They think that the public thinks that that's more important. But when your kid's on a school bus that gets wiped out by a semi and you find out that the guy wasn't licensed properly or at all, you find out his equipment was faulty, are you really going to have had concern about the guy that was trafficking fentanyl when your 8-year-old gets killed in a traffic accident? I don't think so. So anyway, just some food for thought, but I will talk to you guys soon. By the way, I did all that video on Gettysburg, and it's a little bit interesting to me that I'm across the street from the Antietam National Cemetery here in Sharpsburg, Maryland, but just where I found myself today. So anyway, I will talk to you guys soon, and I'll kind of catch you up on what I'm doing.